Hello and welcome to my latest career video. Now this career video features a fighter I've raved about for years on here, okay, the Baltimore Demon, young Peter Jackson, aka Sim Tompkins. Now, just before we get into his career mode, we have to remember we're talking about a fighter who fought fighters pretty much from lightweight to heavyweight, okay, fought fighters who fought across all of those divisions, okay, down at lightweight, welterweight, middleweight. It was a very dangerous fighter indeed. He was still dangerous to the bigger fighters, although not quite as capable of defeating them as he was fighters at lower weight, okay, but we will go through his career. So, young Peter Jackson, not the young Peter Jackson of the 1930s in the lightweight division, the Baltimore Demon. So let us go through his career. Yeah, good to see you, Martin. Hope you're well, buddy. So, on to the first slide of his main career opponents, and he mixed in really tough company. Young Peter Jackson fought the great Australian defensive fighter young Griffo, okay, suffering a defeat in a singular fight. He also 4 times, okay, fought light heavyweight great and all-time great Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, okay. Jackson scored 1 win and suffered 3 defeats, and he also won and lost to former 2-time lineal undisputed welterweight champion Mysterious Billy Smith, with 1 loss, 1 draw, 1 win, 1 loss, no draws. He also fought former coloured lightweight champion Bobby Dobbs 3 times, okay, scoring no wins with 1 loss and 2 draws. And then he fought a 5-fight series, okay, with the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott himself, scoring 1 win with 2 losses and 2 draws. Next up is Harris Martin, the Black Pearl, the former coloured middleweight champion. Young Peter Jackson defeated him. And then he followed up beating another former coloured middleweight champion, Joe Butler. Next up is former welterweight champion Dixie Kidd, okay. Jackson fought him on 1 occasion, suffering a defeat. Yeah, big shout out to Bruce Gass in the chat as well. Good to see you fellas as always. And as if all that isn't enough, he also fought a 6-fight series with the great Sam Langford himself, scoring 1 win with 4 losses and 1 draw. He also fought and went the distance, okay, with the Galveston Giant Jack Johnson, okay, suffering a defeat. And he also fought and lost to heavyweight Hall of Famer Joe Jeanette. Incredible names already there, and a lot of fights, you know, 4 fights with O'Brien, you know, 5 fights with Barbados Walcott, 6 fights with Langford, plus all those other fights. He really does have an insane resume, really, considering the fighters and the weights he fluctuated across. So, carrying on, okay, more real top-level fighters or pound-for-pounders from his time. The first one on here, carrying on from Joe Jeanette, is Oscar Gardner, who you will get to know more on the featherweight playlist. Young Peter Jackson defeated him. And then he also defeated Tommy West, okay, the tough contender who could give Barbados Walcott such difficulty, you know, when they met. Next up is former pound-for-pound rated fighter Dan Creedon, another fighter who mixed in good company. Young Peter Jackson defeats him, and then he closes out a 4-fight series of singular wins against really, really tough contenders when he also fights and defeats the capable Charlie McKeever. So that first slide there, very tough slide, lots of fights against lots of top opposition, top contenders or all-time greats. Just a tough slide. So on to his second slide, okay. Young Peter Jackson fights Mexican Pete Everett, the big punching heavyweight contender, scoring a win. He then fights Kid Parker on 3 occasions, splitting the trilogy, 1 win, 1 loss and 1 draw. And he also fights and loses to contender Otto Seeloff in a singular fight. Next up is contender Jimmy Handler. Young Peter Jackson fights him on 4 occasions, scoring 2 wins with 1 loss and 1 draw. And he also defeats former contender Jack Bonner. Next up is Irish middleweight fighter Mike Donovan, a very, very good fighter indeed, very good contender, very tough fighter. When his career video comes, he mixed in good company as well, and did quite well for himself. Now, young Peter Jackson scored 2 wins with 1 loss from that trilogy of fights with Donovan, and he also fought and lost to former contender Al Weinig. Next up is the Pennsylvania Terror George Cole, another fighter like young Peter Jackson, who fought fighters across multiple weights and just pretty much would fight almost anybody, as you'll see when George Cole's video comes. Now, Sim Tompkins fought him on 2 occasions, okay, suffering 1 loss and 1 draw. And next up is the rugged, hard-punching middleweight contender Larry Temple. Jackson fought him on 2 occasions, scoring 1 win, no loss, 1 draw. He then fought former heavyweight contender Black Bill on 3 occasions, suffering 1 loss with 2 draws. and he also fought and lost to former heavyweight contender Gunboat Smith. The final name on here is Morgan Williams, who young Peter Jackson fought on 2 occasions, suffering 1 loss and 1 draw. So even though he has a losing record in these major fights, all in all, he managed 54 major fights. Okay, he scored 18 wins with 24 losses and 12 draws. 7 of those defeats alone to Langford and Jack O'Brien. So when you add other losses in there to Jack Johnson, 2 to Barbados Walcott, you see even a lot of his defeats was to all-time great opposition. But yeah, very, very tough career. Also factoring he fought fighters across multiple weights. Sometimes he'd fight a guy with a 30-pound weight disadvantage, you know, and he'd fight them, and he'd fight them. He wouldn't run around ring and try and outscore them and nick a decision. He would fight them. You know, that's the kind of fighter he was. So there's his main career breakdown. When we go on to the first of his stat slides, we see that young Peter Jackson scored 59 knockouts, 25 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 2 in the first round. Now he scored 6 KOs or stoppages against champions, 4 against Hall of Famers, and 6 against pound-for-pound fighters. He did not score any knockouts against rated fighters, of course, being a pre-rating era fighter. Now in rounds boxed, he hit well over 1,000 rounds of career experience with a total of 1,298. Young Peter Jackson fought 62 title fight rounds, and he also fought a large 297 rounds against champions, 233 rounds against Hall of Famers, and just over 300 rounds he fought in his career against pound-for-pound fighters, okay, which is the equivalent of more than 25 12-round fights against pound-for-pounders alone. Incredible. So 12-round distance fights. So, against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters and ring champions, of course, young Peter Jackson has zeros, being a pre-rating era fighter. But had he had ratings around, his numbers there would also be very impressive. So, onwards to the slide on champions. Now, young Peter Jackson had 26 fights against champions, including 6 wins, 14 losses and 6 draws, and he defeated 6 individual champions. They were Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Harris Martin, Barbados Joe Walcott, Joe Butler and Sam Langford. Now, impressively, Barbados Walcott, young Peter Jackson, didn't only beat those champions, he scored knockouts or stoppages over every one of them in his career. So he's also knocked out 6 champions: Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Harris Martin, the Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, Joe Butler and Sam Langford. So he knocked out at one point or other every champion he beat. So on to the Hall of Fame slide. Now, on Hall of Famers, he has 21 fights against Hall of Famers, including 4 wins, 12 loss and 5 draw. And Peter Jackson defeated 4 individual Hall of Famers, and not a shabby bunch: Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Barbados Joe Walcott and Sam Langford. And this kind of demonstrates, in a way, I could have highlighted it on the last slide, Jack O'Brien is an ATG light heavyweight who also fought a heavyweight. Mysterious Billy Smith, 2-time lineal welterweight champion. Barbados Walcott, also former welterweight champion. Langford titled for coloured titles at middleweight and heavyweight. So even there he's beaten Hall of Famers who've titled from welterweight to heavyweight. Now, like the champions, of course, as these 4 were champions, so he has also knocked out every Hall of Famer he's beaten. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Barbados Joe Walcott and Sam Langford. So in his career, every Hall of Famer and champion he held a win over, he also stopped. Kind of showing that danger mouse, because Jackson was a 2-handed puncher. He could punch very hard with both hands, and as a small fighter was very quick. So, on to the next slide, okay, which is pound for pound as his largest tally. Now, young Peter Jackson had 28 fights against pound for pound fighters. He defeated 8 individual pound for pound fighters. They were Oscar Gardner, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Barbados Joe Walcott, Tommy West, Dan Creedon, Charlie McKeever and Sam Langford. And he scored knockouts or stoppages over 6 of those 8 pound for pound fighters: Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Mysterious Billy Smith, Tommy West, Dan Creedon, Barbados Joe Walcott, and Sam Langford. Some of these other fighters I've covered on video, I believe already. Dan Creedon, when Oscar Gardner's video comes, you'll also see he had a stacked resume. Even Tommy West has a very good resume, so you will also get to see a load of career videos on a load of the fighters I highlight on these slides. So there's his breakdown of his champions, Hall of Famers and pound-for-pounders. Now on to rated opponents. Now young Peter Jackson had no fights against rated opponents, therefore he has no fights against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters or ring champions, and of course he defeated no individual rated fighters or scored knockouts over 0 individual rated fighters. I'm dying to tell you Robinson's numbers, but that'll have to wait. I've got to keep my enthusiasm in check a little bit. So title fights, okay. Now young Peter Jackson had 4 world title fights. He has a record of 1 win with 2 losses and 1 draw. He made 0 title defences and scored 0 title fight KOs. And he scored 0 wins, of course, as a pre-rating era fighter. Against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters, or ring champions in title fights. He also scored no wins against champions, Hall of Famers and pound-for-pounders in title fights, albeit he did have the 1 title fight. So from there on to titles won. Now young Peter Jackson, of course, captured the coloured middleweight title in his career. Indeed, he fought Sam Langford for that title during Langford's middleweight run. I always find it funny. I always remember an article I read by one of the prominent boxing writers at the time, and it was when Langford had kind of jumped and he were fighting more light heavyweight region fighters, and this writer were debating it were in 1910 or 1911. Okay, so Langford had already been coloured heavyweight champion by this time, but the writer was responding to questions on how the current middleweights, like Papke, Frank Klaus, all these guys would do if Langford got back down to middleweight. Basically, this writer who saw all these guys fight said basically Langford would clean them all out. Klaus, Papke, all them, he said Langford would do away with all of them. It's far too good for all of those, showing how good Langford was as a middleweight. In fact, I think it was Abe Patel who famously said, he would ask, is Sugar Ray Robinson greatest middleweight fight you've ever seen? And Abe Patel, of course, won it legendary featherweight champion, said, no, Ray Robinson ain't greatest middleweight I've ever seen. That's Sam Langford. Showing again how good Langford was at middleweight. So fighting young Peter Jackson at middleweight, young Peter Jackson were a dangerous two-handed puncher who had incredible stamina, a good chin, fighting much bigger fighters, often going distance with fighters like Jack Johnson as a smaller fighter. Impressive career. So young Peter Jackson will take his place on my middleweight playlist. Just to touch on a point I made on Ray Robinson, once I've done the 1890 to 1930 era, okay, and I consider the pre-rating era done, so every fighter after that will be in the full rating era. We're then going anywhere in history. I'll do modern fighters, old fighters, fighters from Robinson's era, fighters from Hagler's era, fighters from this era who are retired. So after the 1890, 1930, all the main 8 divisions, I'll have a bed of fighters, and then we're jumping anywhere. Okay, then we're jumping anywhere. So I'll do old fighters, modern fighters, and mix it up a bit. But I want to get the main 8 divisions at least, with a chunk of fighters on each, covering that period. So it's the, it's the foundation. And then onto that, I'll just pour any fighters I want. Because I'm dying to do videos on fighters like Mayweather and De La Hoya and Pacquiao, and other fighters, Lennox Lewis, etc. So, as well as I am looking forward to doing videos on Ray Robinson, Ike Williams, all these guys. So yeah, Henry Armstrong, etc. So yeah, once the 1890, 1930 is done, we're jumping anywhere, and I'll throw any fighters in there. But there's young Peter Jackson. He'll join my middleweight playlist. Big shout out to Guys in Chat. Always a pleasure to see you. And I will be back tomorrow with another video. So I'm the Boxing Librarian, and I'll catch you later. I'm out for now.